For this video, we're going to be downloading a free trial of Drumagog 5 Platinum today. Just go to drumagog.com and click Try Now. It's going to tell you the system requirements and so on, but you should be able to run this on this one. This is going to be mine since I'm working off a Mac. You could also, if you're on Windows, just know if you're a 64-bit or a 32-bit. If you're on a pretty up-to-date computer, you're likely on a 64-bit install. So I'm going to click the Mac one. You click the one that's appropriate for you, and it'll download. Might take a little while because they're going to give you some files with it. So just wait for the download to go ahead and finish up, and then follow the install directions, and you should be all set up. All right, thanks for being with me here, and just download those files so we can get working on Drumagog. Okay, so I'm going to continue to take you through the install on Drumagog. Just go to your downloads folder or wherever this downloaded to, and double-click on your Drumagog demo. It'll start installing pretty quickly. Not a huge file, kind of big, but it'll install fast for us. So we have that set up. Now we have to set our install up. Just double-click on that. Continue our way through, give it whatever information it wants, agree with all of its licenses, and install. It'll ask for your password most likely. And we're validating the packages, ready to install. I'm writing the files, making it very simple for us to get through this. So this is going to take a few minutes here, so I'm going to let this finish and then come back with you. Okay, and the next thing we will see as we launch up Pro Tools, we'll have to absolutely close Pro Tools, quit Pro Tools completely. You just go up to Pro Tools and you go to quit, and that's how you quit Pro Tools out, obviously there. But now this activation is required, will pop up on your screen, and it will require an activation. So what we want to do is just press try, because we're going to try it out today, see if we like it. Please enter your iLock.com account credentials. So that is your user ID and your password. You just enter that in right there. And then select the activation location, and that will be on my iLock 3, maybe on your iLock 1 or 8 or whatever it might be. Just click on that and hit next. Now it is setting up the license. Do not take your iLock out during this, as if you would. And congratulations, the demo has been activated. So you successfully activated that demo, and now Pro Tools will continue its load up, and I'll see you in there to start working on it. Okay, so here we are in Pro Tools, ready to work with Drumagog a bit. First things first, we want to sample the kick drum. Let's solo out the kick drum, see what we're working with. Great. Okay, so that's our basic sound. And what you want to do with Drumagog is you want to balance your sounds. You want to use your original sounds as much as possible with more sounds put in there. Maybe a bass drum that has more boom to it and a bass drum that has more punch to it. In case you want more punch or anything from your bass drum, you mix it in with your kick right now. So let's go ahead and make a new track. Just track new, and we'll create a mono audio track. And let's call that Kick Gogs for Drumagog, and just OK it. Now we'll set up our busing. We need to bus into this. Drumagog can be used without any busing. You can use it just as a plugin, but it's just not the way I typically like to do it, and it takes up a lot of computer power. So I'd like to print my track, so we're going to do it that way, print everything down, and that gives us the opportunity to edit it and decide if some hits are different than we want them to be. If we want them to be louder or softer or anything like that, we could fix it rather than letting the computer play it back every single time the same way. So let's set up our inputs and outputs right under our I/O. Ins are over outs, so we're going to the bottom one, we're going to our bus output, and we'll bus output 1. And then we will go to our GOGS track, to the top one, our in, and we will bus input 1. And that is it. Hit solo on your next track, and record arm your GOG track right there. Now, to bring up the Drumagog plugin, we go to Plugin, Other, Drumagog 5 Mono. We're going to be using the mono one for everything that we're doing here. Generally, I use Drumagog on kick drum, snare drum, and when it's necessary, I will also use it on rack tom, floor tom, or anything like that as well. All right, so they have us right where they want us here. This is how you pick your files. So you have your GOG files, and they're just giving us a demo collection, which looks like it is a kick and a snare. So we'll work with that now. We'll do the kick, and we will do the snare. All right, so these are all different volume hits. That's the beauty of Drumagog. You could also do things like dynamic multi-sampling. So if it hits louder, it's going to go to one of the louder hits. If it hits softer, it'll go to one of the softer hits. You'll have random multi-samples. So you can see the different colors. Here's all these purples. These are about the same volume hit, but it won't use the same hit every single time, just to make it sound as real as possible. It has articulations. Use left and right hand. There's a lot to this. It's basically what was used. The left and right hand would be for the snare drum, of course. We're working with the kick. It's what he used to hit this while they were collecting the sample, his left hand or his right hand, and then use dynamic tracking, which means even if we get a purple one and it's a little lower than another one which is in the purple range as well, it will keep it a little bit lower. I'm going to show you the most simple way of doing this first, and then you can play around and have fun with all of this other stuff. Generally, since we're keeping the original kick in there, we don't need that much dynamic sampling going on. So I'm going to turn the dynamic sampling down quite a bit. I'll take on some of these special things as well, just because we don't need it. Let's get rid of the articulation. So we're just going to be working with the dynamic multi-sample and the random multi-sample. So we'll go ahead and start recording just to see what's going on. Let's zoom in, grab a small portion of this, and start our record. This is our sensitivity bar. The second that something gets higher than our sensitivity, it's our threshold. It's really that simple. As long as it reaches that threshold, it will trigger one of these multi-samples to happen. So take a look at that. We need to press record here, hit your F12 button, and take a look. Looks like we got the snares going. Go back here where it says kick and just double click that. Okay, here we are. Now we're on the kick one. The snares must have been automatically highlighted. It's got to double click to fix that. Real simple. F12, let's take a listen now. And I want to be clear on dynamic multi-samples and random multi-samples, since that's what we're using right now. Dynamic multi-samples means that each one of these colors are a different volume, a different dynamic, we'd call it. So maybe the blue is the loudest, all the blue ones are the loudest ones, and maybe the red is the second loudest, so every hit that it gets that's a little less than the blue one will go through the red track, and so on and so on. And random multi-sample means it's going to pick a blue one at random rather than picking the same one over and over. Now, if we want to get more dynamics into this, turn on dynamic tracking, and then you'll get a much more dynamic range here. So make sure you record armed, hit your F12, and take a look at that. So you could see there that there was a bit of loud and soft there. Let's take a zoom in over here. See, this hit is much lower than this hit. So that's what you get when you're in dynamic tracking. So you can have a lot of fun with this plugin because you really can make anything sound like anything. I mean, like we had before, we made that mistake of not double clicking the maple kick, and we were still going through the snare version. So the kicks got turned into snares. So imagine the possibilities there. So when you're doing this, you want to go ahead and pick sounds that complement your drums. And then you want to make your choice that if you need dynamic tracking or not. After that, go ahead and you can play around with Auto Align 2.0 and hi-hat tracking if you're doing cymbals, stuff like that. But for right now, I'd say keep it pretty simple. Go with dynamic tracking, go without dynamic tracking, and just get it to sound good. Use your ears. before you go and get into the weeds with all the other cool features that they have here. I'll unrecord arm all of these. We'll set it up for the snare drum. So we get one more setup in. We'll create a new track new, mono, and we will call it snare gog, and OK it. Let's do our bus 2 for our input on our snare, and we will do snare top out bus 2. So here we are setting up another one. It'll go out of bus 2 into our snare track for when we want to print our gog. Let's turn that on record. Let's turn this on solo. And let's turn our plugin on to other and Drumagog 5 mono. And here we are again. So we are originally in the snare area. I'm going to take off all the extras. We'll use the left-right hand, but we'll play around with those other extras at some other time. One more thing that is important when you are tracking through Drumagog is your volume control. The louder the input, the louder the output. So let's get into that and into the sensitivity. And these sensitivity lines you could pick up and put down and everything like that. So let's get into the volume control and the sensitivity line when we go in with this. Let's put it all the way up at 0 for our volume here. And give that a record and see what happens with our sensitivity. F12 to record. Great. So we're collecting pretty much all the snare drums here, but now if I brought it down quite a bit, let's see what happens. So the sensitivity won't change, but the output will change. It'll be much lower. Completely different signal, much smaller. I was much happier with the big one. So I like to reset these volumes to 0 whenever I'm doing this. Just solo them both out, lower your volume if it's too loud in your speakers, and just record it that way. So our sensitivity bar has to be our threshold. So let's see what happens when we pick that up all the way to -2.6 over here. We probably won't get many snare drums actually getting picked up by Drumagog now. So we missed a ton of snare drums because our sensitivity was too high. Now I'm going to adjust it on the fly, start recording, hit F12, and start moving your sensitivity up and down and find the right spot. So the goal when you're doing that is to capture all the snare drums and don't capture anything else. If there's a bass drum bleed or rack tom is coming in through that snare drum microphone a little bit, you don't want to get that, so you try to adjust the sensitivity. There are some other cool ways of doing that. Say you have a bass drum and you did a sweep with your EQ and found a frequency that really pops. You could click this on, take it to the frequency that really pops, whatever it might be, and it will trigger off that frequency in general instead of triggering off the entire sound, which would save you a bit of copying and pasting later if you have some too much mic bleed going on. So that's a pretty cool feature. Play around with that because then you could go into your bass drum, find where it's the most boomy, take this frequency to that, throw the level up. You could adjust the Q, just copy whatever Q you had when you were in your EQ, and you'll be able to use this program a little bit more for things that have too much bleed on it. So that really is how this program works. We saw the basics with the bass drum. We got into the weeds a little bit with sensitivity and stuff like that. The only other thing we can get in is the input and output. Very simple thing. If you want more input, you could just raise this from left to right and the signal will get higher. If your output is too hot, meaning you're redlining on the snare gog track, go from right to left to lower your output. If it's just way too low, you could go from left to right to raise your output. I guess I show you one more thing that I personally like, because I'm over here watching which snares it's hitting, and some of the snares I don't like sometimes, so I'll go and I'll click it, and I'll click mute. and it X's it out, no longer uses that even when it's on the random multi-samples. So it will randomly multi-sample, but it will always skip the one that you decided to mute. And if you want that back on, just click that mute off and you're good to go. So that's the basic overview of Drumagog. There's a lot of features you could really dig in, and you have 14 days to do so with the trial version. I suggest if you like this, you go ahead and get the regular version, because you'll use it a lot. You'll probably make your money back quick if your drum sounds are fantastic. A lot of people are looking for that on their record, that the drums stand out. So take a look at that. There's a lot more to it when you get into it. There's a lot more files you could use. When you buy it, it'll come with more than one kick drum and one snare drum. You'll have a ton of files to work with. You could pick out different drums for different bands and pick out supporting sounds that work with the sounds that you originally captured. So great. Thanks for being with me on this one, and I'll see you on the next one.